like mine and yours. We have Eric Cottrell. He is liaison with the Arc of Southside Self Advocacy Group with us, if you want to wait. And we have Brittany Lee. She is the co-chair of the A Life Like Your Self Advocacy Alliance, and Jesse Monroe, liaison from Our Voices. Happy to have all of you here today. Thank you. This training came about and was created by the new Self Advocacy Alliance. And so that's the first thing we want to share with you, is a little bit about that alliance. It was funded by the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities. And I'm going to hand it over to Brittany to tell us a little bit about the alliance itself.
Hello, my name is Brittany, and I'm on the Life Like Your Alliance team. We come together to form a group, and we also work to help others to try to form a group.
Excellent.
The, the Alliance represents 16 advocacy groups. The Alliance and each of our member groups areas by and for people with developmental disabilities. We work together to spread awareness about why inclusive services like individualized housing, supportive employment, and personalized services are needed. We help providers to develop services that give us maximum control and autonomy of our lives, over our lives.
Excellent. Thank you. And the Alliance has been very busy. The Alliance has been meeting since March. A lot of changes came about with COVID, as it did for everyone. And so they've been meeting twice a week since March to do the work that they've been doing in sharing this information, not only with providers, but with families and people with disabilities across the state. So I'm going to first start by sharing with you the journey of the Arc of Southside. I'm with the Arc of Virginia now, but in 2000, excuse me, 11, I was with the Arc of Southside as we started our transformation from traditional services to community-based services. And this is what we looked like when in 2011. We had a private day school where 28 students were there, and it was just for students with disabilities. And we had a group home where 8 adults shared that house, and a sheltered workshop. It was really one of the largest sheltered workshops in Virginia. All of the programs were for people with disabilities, and all segregated in one location. Right now, you can see a picture of what it looked like. It really was a very large campus environment and on the side of a highway. So very isolated, not only isolated because it only provided services to people with disabilities, but isolated in where its location was. And if you look on the screen, the way it works is on the left side here, that was the group home. And then you see the large sheltered workshop, the white building in the back. And there's just this circle drive that has administrative offices and the school here on the right. So you can see it was quite a separate place. And we used to talk about it as having a sidewalk life. That if you maybe lived in this group home and you worked at this sheltered workshop, then you would wake up each day. You would have breakfast across the table from one of your roommates or housemates. But that is someone that wasn't a relationship for you. You didn't choose to live with them. They were likely placed in that group home as you were placed in that home. And you would then walk down the sidewalk to work, and spend the day with the same folks and walk back. And I say that not to minimize the great work that the Arc of Southside staff were doing. It really was an excellent provider of traditional services, but it was about waking up and seeing that if we change the way we did things, then that changed people's lives to be able to have a life like mine and yours. So we always said we went from sidewalks to life. These are some pictures from folks at the Arc of Southside as they went through their journey. So today I'm going to talk about how we did that, how we made that change. And we started by talking to the people that mattered the most, the people who used our services, and asking them questions, and in many cases, asking them questions they hadn't been asked before. Like, what do you want for your life? Where do you want to live? What does a day look like to you? And we found that a lot of people had not been asked those things. So we had a lot of group discussions, put up surveys, put up places where people could write ideas, because it was really just about meeting with each person, talking to them about their life, and then figuring out how we could just help them achieve whatever it is that they wanted. So when we thought about inclusion, we wanted to define that for ourselves as we had those conversations. When I say we, I mean everyone. And that's the people who were using the services, whether you were living in a group home, the group home, or the workshop, whatever, as well as the staff, the team, everyone together. And inclusion really meant, instead of providing programs, it was taking our services to the community. So people live and work and do all the things that all of us do, and our services would follow them in their lives to help them to do that. So our board of directors, it starts with the board in making decisions, and they put a strategic plan together in 2012. It was ranged from the 2012 to 2014, and the focus was to help people get to life. So they voted that the workshop would close and the workshop would be replaced by services that followed people in their life. Supported employment and community engagement. The group home was going to be replaced by in-home support, supported living, and while we won't focus on this today, private day school, we did close that private day school, and students were supported to go back to their neighborhood schools. This is what the ARC looks like now. I'm not there, but I have been in touch with to get kind of the most current numbers. Although these numbers were current month and a half, 2 months ago, it's probably different now. We did close the group home, close the workshop, and the day school, and are supporting 29 people to live in their own homes. And we only support people in their own homes because during our transition, one of the phrases that came up that I really liked was "home like will never be home," and that was Monica Karavanek, our residential director. And it's so true. We had worked so hard to make things home-like, and we really just needed, in our group home, and we really just needed to realize that we could help people just to have a home, and it wouldn't need to be home-like. They were supporting 52 people to spend time doing the things that they want through community engagement, and celebrated their 122nd job placement through supported employment recently. So some of the things that happened after we made that transition, things looked really different. People had real lives, more natural connections. The demand for the services grew and resulted in a waiting list. And the last time I talked to the team at the Arc of Southside, there is a large waiting list now. And you don't always hear that. You often hear providers looking for people to serve. You might hear a group home provider talking about vacancies that they have. And that's something that we faced at the Arc of Southside before the transition. And once we started changing the services we were providing, the demand changed. And so there is a wait list for all of the services. And our revenues grew and we're more diversified. I'd like to share this story of Alan in the middle there. The Arc of Southside's in Danville, Virginia, and that's a small community, but they had a public awareness campaign that they were doing, the Middle Border Forward, and they were highlighting citizens, neighbors, people in Danville, to talk about being a resident of the community. And so Alan was one person who was featured, and he is quite handsome and loves. I love seeing that picture of him because he's just got such a personality. But what was exciting about this for us was that when I found out about this project and that Alan was in this project, it was already done. He had had his photo shoot. The things were posted up on the walls around buildings around the community, and so the key was that that happened naturally for him with relationships that he built in the community. He was working at Chick-fil-A at the time, I believe, and so he had made these connections. So it wasn't something that we as a provider set up. You know, we often do that where we're setting things up and we're doing this. But because of that change, and he was part of his community around him, he was included in this opportunity that came along. So that is one of my favorite things to be aware of. It's about us as providers getting out of the way. When we think about the business side of inclusion, we have to think about, it's not that we like to think about, but we have to think about financial circumstances and how it shook out financially for us. Every situation for every provider is different. However, I will say, because we were diversifying our revenues grew. The return on investment is way bigger when what you're investing in is people's lives, instead of some of the things like buildings and vehicles that when you have traditional programs you have to put your money into, and they're costly. They are costly. They are time consuming. When you're taking care of buildings or property, that can take up a lot of human energy and financial resources. And so the return on that investment, when the funds that you're using are invested in the services that people need, then your return is greater. And as I said, the demand for services are much bigger because the demand is driving the market. It's driving what we hope providers, like we did, need to provide, is based on what the customers are asking for, and building services and supports around each person. The other thing that I've noticed when I've talked to people around the country, actually, about COVID, around Virginia and around the country, but with COVID-19, there's a real opportunity now. And I can imagine, I'm out of the role as a provider now, so I speak at a little bit of a distance, but I remember what the pressures were like. And so I did that for 20 plus years. So the pressures you're under right now are absolutely incredible. Everything from keeping people safe and healthy through a very difficult time, to having to meet the demands that are coming from our state naturally on quality services, quality service reviews, all of the things related to the DOJ. So there are a lot of pressures, but there may also be an opportunity, particularly for programs that were forced to shut down during the pandemic, to reemerge and come out on the other side in a different way, focusing on inclusive services. We know that people with disabilities are at a higher risk of contracting COVID and dying from COVID. And a part of that reason is around the country, when you look, the high amount of people who are spending time in sheltered or segregated settings. Anytime people are congregate together, then we know that the risks are higher for COVID. So there may be some opportunity to use inclusive services as a way to keep people safer, and to maintain that revenue, because this is going to continue. And so when the shutdown happened, inclusive services had to continue. They had to find new ways to do it, but they could maintain that revenue because it needed to continue. And so you have less disruption to business. So that's what the transition for the ARC looked like. And right now I want to turn it over to talk to Eric a little bit about, he specifically was part of the ARC of Southside, is still part of the ARC of Southside. So Eric, if you'll unmute and tell us a little about your story as we made that transition.
My name is Eric Trev from Southside Danville, Virginia. I worked in the largest workshop around the world. My first job was Mount Hermon Animal Clinic. I worked there for three years. Then I got laid off doing money budget. So I had to went back to the workshop, and I came a one staff from the high school kid.
Excellent. Now, so that's right, you were at Mount Hermon Animal Clinic, and they were a nonprofit clinic, and they, like a lot of us, faced some financial issues. And so, through no fault of your own, you were laid off, and you didn't want to go back to the workshop doing the sheltered work. And so, you were hired as a one on one staff with the high school students.
Yes,
So, how was that?
it was fun. It ready for the test.
They put you through the test. Okay. Well, that's great. So you provided one-on-one services. I will say that Eric was you received the same wage as any direct support professional. And what about the paperwork and requirements for the job?
I had to do a bunch of paperwork, like other supervisor had to do with their people.
Okay. Well, see, I think what your story demonstrates is one of the things that we often hear as a fear when we're making this transition or change is what about someone getting a job and it not working out? And so your story demonstrates that that's right. We don't all typically have the first job that we ever landed. I certainly don't. I imagine very few people do. And so when that job changed, it was really about you and the team that you were working with being creative and finding out and talking about, well, what could you do? And it just so happened that we had a position open to make sure that you had a place to land while you looked for your next job. And it filled a role for us, but it really is about being creative. And so then what is the position that you are in now?
I work for PRFC feeding clinic. We help older and kids to eat again after they had a stroke or a heart attack, where they can eat again, where they be able to eat at home as well in public. And also we also do speech.
Speech therapy. Okay, so speech and occupational, all those therapies. And what is your role in your job? What do
My
you?
job, my job is put fix the food, put on the tray, and when that session's over, I clean the room for the next patient comes in.
Okay, setting up the therapy room and then coming back and helping to clean that and make that transition for the next person.
Yes.
Okay, great. What do you like about your job?
What I liked about it is seeing them to come out and with a big smile on their face each every day. That's telling me my job, I'm doing a good job.
Oh, that's great. I like that. I like that. A big smile on their face. And what changed in your life after you moved out, or you moved out of the workshop and got your job? What else is different in your life since you went into support employment?
Uh, I finally, I used to live with my mom. Uh, then I finally moved out on my own. It's really fun to live on your own. You're able to do more stuff on your own. You don't have to worry about you go to bed anytime you want to. You get up when you want to, and you cook your own favorite food. Out somebody have to cook it.
Sounds like freedom and independence. That's awesome.
Yes.
That's great. That's great. Okay, well, good. Well, thank you for sharing that. Do you want to share, are there any goals that you have for the the future. So now you've been able to get your own job, get your own place. Is there anything that you're looking towards in the future, or something you'd like to share?
I will hopefully by next year. I probably go to school this year, but unfortunately the COVID-19 kind of messed that up for me this year. So I'll be hoping by next 2021 I'll be able to go to next school.
Excellent. Well, that you were saying something that most people are saying right now. COVID messed a lot of things up. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. And I like to say one more thing
Oh,
for
please.
people.
Uh-huh.
People, if I can live on my own, you can do it too. Don't never give up, and don't let nobody tell you you cannot do it, because you can do it. And thank you.
That is wonderful. That's inspiring. Thank you for that. Um, so the next person we want to talk to is Jesse about his experience, so we can all see the variety of ways that people are supported to live their lives. So, Jesse.
Hi. Hello, everyone. My name is Jesse Monroe. I live in Norfolk, Virginia. I'm part of the Life Like Yours Alliance and local advocacy group, Our Voices. I uh, I moved out on my own about 4 years ago. Before I moved out on my own, I lived with family, and that was tough. I had some in-home supports, however, they were inconsistent at best. And sometimes they didn't come at all, and that put a huge strain on my family. In fact, some of them, some family members even lost jobs over it because they had to take care of me instead of doing their jobs. So, but so I found out about Hope House Foundation. They support me living in my own apartment. I have a disability called arthrogryposis, which tightens and constricts the joints, and so I have no movement of my limbs, and so I need help with all daily functions. And but the good thing is I have the support, when as needed, when I need it, anytime that I need it. But I live independently in my own apartment and pay rent and do all the things everyone else does as far as upkeep of their apartment. And it's really changed my life a lot. I make my own schedule. I can go out when I want to, like to movies or breweries. Do. I can also do the advocacy work for people with disabilities that I've wanted to do for a long time. Um, so now I can do all that and have the schedule I want to. And so now, of course, I'm on the board of the ARC and do several other things. And another great thing about it, is I have in my apartment, I have a lot of technology that makes makes me much more independent. Uh, I have two devices, Google Home and Alexa Story, that allow me to turn on and off all the lights in my apartment. I can open and close the door in my apartment by myself, just by my voice. And I also have a voice activated computer using a program called Dragon Naturally Speaking. I think the technology component for people with disabilities is very important. I think with technology, you, you can people can be more independent and need less assistance. So now I need far less assistance than I would have otherwise, and so that is also important. And I think that I was very worried about living on my own, and but because of but with the right sports, I'm living independently and safely, and I so yes.
That's great. Thank you for sharing.
Mhm.
I think that all of those points, and I tell you, your story demonstrates the key that technology really plays. and now plays in all of our lives. It is a way of life. So thank you for sharing. Next, we'll go to Brittany. Brittany, would you like to tell us about your story?
Hello, my name is Brittany Lee. I'm from Richmond, Virginia. For years, I lived with my adoptive mother. I known I wanted my own place. So my sister helped me fill out the application, actually for both of us. We both moved exactly at the same time. When I got my mother was ill. When she was ill, I didn't want to leave her. But she said it was best for me to go ahead and find my own place so that I'll be settled in my apartment. When I first got my apartment, I was so scared. I didn't know what to do. But at the same time, it was an overjoy having my own apartment. It was me having a choice, independence with no support at the time. I had my mother. That was about it. And I had people to come over. They didn't really help at all. But I made up my mind when my mother got sicker to move to a independent living setting in my own apartment. And boy, this is so wonderful. I have a choice, freedom, independence. I get help with my daily meds, getting dressed from the bottom, and I dress the top. We do community integration. They take us grocery shopping and out to the movies. But due to COVID, we do stuff inside together as a group. It's like 8 of us that live in a apartment setting with other people. So we all come together separately to do things to keep us occupied during COVID. Now, the thing that I like most about having my own apartment is that I have my own things. I have a lot of technology. I didn't have a clue what it was. All I known is that it was a computer that I could possibly work on. But with the Arc of Virginia helping me realizing what technology was, it was a blessing. I didn't even know what Zoom was. I was like, what is Zoom? It was like, it's something you can get on to communicate with people. I said, wow, this is gonna be great. So I really started to learn about Zoom through the Arc of Virginia and through the alliance with us working together to form a group. That's how I learned about the technology. Now, what I can leave you with is you can fight, you can win, you can strive for what's out there. Don't give up. Keep your eyes on the prize. and take the credit after you don't work so hard. Take the credit where it's due. Thank you.
That's awesome. That's great. Inspiring. Thank you. Brittany, we are all learning this together, aren't we? I don't think any of us
Yes.
I don't think any of us knew that we'd be living our lives on Zoom at any point. So thank you for that story. I think you can see that from all of the stories, this demonstrates that regardless of what supports you need, everybody can live their own lives and they can do so in their own homes, in their own directed ways. It may look different for everybody, just like all of our lives look different, but everyone can be supported in the community. So one thing, so that's what the Arc of Southside did in the transformation, and then you've heard three very important stories that are personal stories of how people are living their lives in the community. So one thing that we're often asked is, how did we as a provider make that change? The how did we do it? So I'll go through a little bit of that. To get one of the most important things was getting the board to the why, right? Our why always stayed the same, that we wanted people to have that full life, but we needed everyone to get to that. And so we used a lot of different tools that you have, I'm sure. Some of these I mentioned, the Credo for Support, language of us and them, all of these things you can go out and find on the internet, because there are so many providers across the country that have made this transition, and those are great examples to follow. And so that's what we used, and we use that to convince the board to make this change, because we had to start with the leadership so that we can ensure that it would be committed to and that it would continue. So that was our first push, was because it was the right thing to do. Our second push was really because it was more required to do, as HCBS, DOJ, all of these other things started coming along, that I think helped to reinforce our why, that was really because it was the right thing. So this is an example of one of the things that I shared both with board, with staff, anyone. And I'm just going to take a moment and read through it, because I think it's a very powerful poem. It's The Language of Us and Them by Meyer Shevin. We like things. They fixate on objects. We try to make friends. They display attention-seeking behavior. We take breaks. They display off-task behavior. We stand up for ourselves. They are non-compliant. We have hobbies. They self-stem. We choose our friends wisely. They display poor peer socialization. We persevere. They perseverate. We enjoy a nice meal. They get fed. We go for a walk. They run away. We insist. They tantrum. We change our minds. They have short attention spans. We enjoy nights out with friends. They go on community outings. We are human. They are human. We find that language is very powerful. It influences how we look at people, and it influences how we respond to them. So I always shared that poem during staff trainings or with anyone, to make it clear that the words we choose to use change the way we feel about other people and respond to people. And truly, I would often say in staff meetings, things like that, staff training, not to use words about people that were using our services, about or to them, that you wouldn't use about or to me or yourself. And it makes a difference. So I mentioned the new why a little while ago, HCBS rule, WIOA, the Work Incentives Opportunity Act. Those things were important because, for example, the sheltered workshop, with WIOA, we could no longer take high school students, which is how Eric entered. He mentioned that earlier. He entered that sheltered workshop when he was in high school, and then full circle later, he was a direct support staff for other high school students. But with the WIOA passage, we no longer could have high school students come into the workshop automatically. And they did in our area, they did that as a matter of habit. They went directly from schools into the workshop. And instead, now people have to have the opportunity to explore those other work paths and career paths and future planning. So after the board was completely bought in, and they were, the next was of course buy-in from staff, and we did the same things. We philosophy trainings, different exercises, videos, and we heard from staff that they deeply cared about the people they were supporting. Absolutely, they did. But once they heard what was possible, they wanted more for the people that they were supporting. I remember one of our staff members, Terry, saying that she felt like that staff were maybe more sheltered, or at least as sheltered as the people that we were serving, because they just didn't know. And so once staff knew, oh, well, I can help this person to get a job, then they were happy to do that and see the ways that they could follow them with support into their job in the community, instead of supporting them at work in a sheltered workshop. So their minds were as much opened as everybody else's. All of our minds were. So we did a lot of ongoing training to make sure that we were training people about the opportunities. We were sharing good news. Actually, I didn't even realize this, or maybe that Eric, this particular edition of this newsletter is when you got your job. So we shared good news from people so that it got folks motivated and excited, because one thing we know is change is hard. Humans don't love to change, and it is a lot of hard work. And so we wanted to keep people motivated. This is a tool from Michael Small, I think. I can't remember for sure, but it's a tool that I really like. It's just an arrow. It seems simple. But what we did was we asked people to look at the programs they were working in at the time, look at the agency as a whole, and put an X on the arrow of where they thought we were in this transition time. On the left of the arrow, you see institutional life, and that's where we were even as a good provider in the beginning, because the nature of providing congregate programs leads to people having virtually no control over their daily life choices, even when we try. So we weren't as likely to be all the way on the left, but there were a lot of marks close to that. And then as you go through the transition, you're looking at a good quality service life where people have input on their life decisions, exercising some personal daily choices, having some limited freedoms. And I say limited because when you're in a congregate setting and one person chooses, say you're living in a group home, you're sharing it with 4 other people, and this person wants to do something that's different than you, well, then you're not getting complete freedom. And then all the way on the right of the arrow is a life like yours, which we picture that as someone living in their own home, whatever that looks like for them. That could be an apartment, that could be a house, they could have a roommate, they may live alone, they may have staff that come in 20 hours a month, 10 hours a week, or staff that are there with them 24 hours a day. It depends. It's different for each person. But it looks like mine in your life in that they have the control over the decisions, over their own life and their environment. It is their home. So we wanted to make sure that we were not just making these changes and this transformation in words, but we were talking the talk, walking the walk, as they say. We started with big things, made sure websites and signs had language that was positive and affirming to people. Policies, we adopted policies on enhancing language. changing our words because it changes how we view people. If I need to go somewhere today and my car is broken down, then I call my friend Lucy for a ride. I don't call Lucy and ask her to transport me. And it changes that power view when you talk about it in natural language. So we removed things like client and permission, words like that, and we changed our job description to make sure that it talked about the role of the direct support professionals in a different way, that they're supporting, teaching, guiding, connecting, facilitating, and our job descriptions require a commitment to inclusion. We changed the same things on performance evaluations to reinforce with staff what our values were and what mattered and what would lead to people having a life like mine and yours. So there were a lot of questions, right? As you can imagine. What about safety? What about people getting enough support, losing benefits, losing jobs? People were worried about a lot of things when we said that we were making these transitions. And it was everybody that was worried. Parents, staff, people with disabilities had these worries. And the way we answered that was really one-on-one talks, examples of success, and just taking each person's life one day at a time, but one person at a time, because the team that's built around one person is going to look different for everybody, and therefore the solutions that you come up with are going to look different. And the human is human is human. However things would be for the person if they didn't have a disability, then you think about that. How would I figure this out for my life? And start putting in solutions for that person. So success is very catchy. These are just some great pictures of some people who were working and living their life quite happily. This is Lisa going into her apartment for the first time. You know, these things felt really good. And people were excited to go out and share their stories. So they, as part of the self-advocacy group, they started a speakers bureau and went out and talked about what the transition was like. What was it like that first time I left the group home and I was in my own apartment? We've heard a lot of people say, well, it was scary, just like the first time I was in my own place. And so it was really fun to watch people go out and tell their own stories, just like we're hearing people tonight share their stories. Are always celebrating and having a good time. I also like to share some of the lessons that we learned. What went well for us, listening to people, having an inclusion champion. And what I mean by that is everyone at the agency had to understand what we meant by inclusion, whether that was, direct support staff, program directors, all the way to the bookkeeper and the person at the front desk, because you've got to be able to read from the same sheet of music and all be going towards the same goal. So thank you. So in our case, I considered myself the inclusion champion. It really can be anyone. While it might have started that way, we probably had dozens. But this person is someone who's going to bring up the question of inclusion at every conversation, in every board meeting, every team meeting, every conversation about policy, so that they're saying, how is what we're talking about impacted by making sure that people are included in their communities, truly included. And it has to be said all the time. We wanted to remember that all means all. You've heard from the stories tonight that there's a lot of diversity among the folks on our panel. And regardless of your support need, you can be supported in your own home. So it's not really, some people will talk about independent housing, but it's individualized housing. Because independent housing makes it sound as though you have to be independent. You're going to go there and no one's going to be supporting you. But it's individualized to set up that plan for you that, again, might be 10 hours a week or 10 hours a month or 24 hours a day. So it really is important that we remember all means all. And some of the folks that were probably told many times over, you'll never live in your own place. People who had a lot of difficulty with regulating their own emotions and their own actions, what others would call behaviors. those were people that we were told individualized housing cannot work for this person. And I am sure that everyone at the Arkansas side would say those are the people, the exact people that we found it worked the best for. Because when you remove some of those things that were happening around the person, and all of the team's focus is figuring out what they're trying to communicate or what their need is, how their day needs to go in order for them to be able to self-regulate, then when those things disappear, things go a lot more smoothly. We emphasize language, as I said, and always going back to the human factor. We made some mistakes, obviously, along the way, and I think that what we learned is you can never include the authentic voice of people with disabilities enough. There were places in our plan and places where, when we were doing the work of making the transition, that I think that we didn't include the voice of people enough. And so therefore, we would go a certain direction and realize we had made a mistake because we weren't listening, and we had to readjust. I think we needed stronger buy-in from families earlier, and our gung-ho nature, optimistic nature that I have can sometimes headstrong, get going. And while we involve the families, of course, from the beginning, I say this as we probably would advise others to make them part of that process earlier on. To make sure that we have the commitment from everyone. And then recognizing the loss of friendships. We certainly recognize that, but I think doing that really early so we can have concerted plans in place to help people stay connected is something that's important. As I said, our why message stayed the same, a life like yours. We all want the same things in life, and we all need support and help to get there. Our job as providers is simply to follow people and provide the support that they need to live their life as they choose. So I think all of you as providers are aware, I'm not going to go through these slides, but when we went through waiver redesign, and gosh, time is blended together, 2016, these are the services that are available in the waiver. They are available right now to provide anyone, regardless of their support need, the opportunity to live fully included lives. All of the services are there to get people to that place. So there's community housing guide, and all of you know these things, but supported living, shared living, in-home support, personal care, all of these things. And remembering that supports can be up to 24/7. There are examples in these services that are listed here where you can receive that service in your home as much as you need. The idea is, and Jesse talked about technology, is for providers to be out of the way and out of people's space as much as possible, without leaving people without the support that they need and want. So it's really just finding the ways to do that. And I think if we are creative and you can blend these services together, then you can do just that. Where home is, home can be anywhere. It looks different for everybody, as I said, living in an apartment, a condo, living alone, having roommates. I remember when we went through our transition, there was a gentleman named Bo. When he was asked about his dream for what his future would look like and his home, all he wanted was a front porch for his rocking chair. So we all value different things, and I can tell you he has that. And that was very important. We had a session earlier this week that's now available on demand, or will be by the end of the conference, on affordable housing resources. So the housing vouchers and subsidies that can help people afford where they're going to live. Just like me and you, we choose where we're going to live based on what we can afford. So it's making a plan with each person, and these are some resources that can help people to achieve that. A big difference, I think, in providing traditional services, whether in this case, group homes, is that we're taking and separating the two issues: housing, which is the physical place I live, and services and supports. when you're providing traditional congregate services, those two things are together. And so if I don't like where I live and I'm no longer wanting to live here, that's tangled up with my services. And so that creates a problem of rights, civil rights and human rights. If I no longer want to live here, but this is where this provider is providing services and I like that provider. Or it could be the opposite. I really like my house, I like where I'm living, but I no longer want to work with this provider. They're tangled together. And that's really where the HCBS rule comes into play, is we need to take those things apart. So the people are choosing where they live. Do I want to live in the country? Do I want to live in the city? Do I want an apartment? Do I want to be in the hustle and bustle of things or out on a large piece of land? What is it that it looks like? I've seen several families who had at the Ark of Southside, one woman in particular comes to mind. Her family had lived on this larger piece of land with a house, and she had lived there with her mom for many years. And her family made arrangements so when her mom passed, that she would be able to live there. So there's all kinds of ways that people's lives can be figured out. And so we want to separate these two things. So you figure out where you want to live, how you want to live, and then we add in the services and supports that can go around you to do what you need. And so then we also have support at work. There's benefits planning, supported employment, workplace assistance. All of these things are in place so that we can work with a lot more of a variety of people to work in the community. And then we have the last thing. There's a lot more to life than working. And so community engagement and coaching and community guide, personal care assistance, all of these things help people to go and do things, do the things that you want to do, build relationships, all of the things that make life fun. And these supporting people in their life, this happens at any time. And I know there are a lot of providers who have been adding this service. So we've talked a lot. I've talked a lot. I want to ask Lucy if there are any questions or comments from the chat box that we could answer. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see Lucy.
Oops. Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
We've got lots of comments from people in here. Karen Gregory just said, thanks for explaining the difference about how services and where you live are tangled up. I put a question in and asked anyone who is a provider, if you're providing individualized housing, would you please put the name of your agency in the chat so people can know? Great session. As the former residential director at the Ark of Southside, I can attest to this. That was Monica saying.
Oh, Monica. Oh, good.
Housing is, and that working with people who have had such great challenges are the people who benefited the most. Thanks for sharing this. And this is a really important question. How did you finally convince the board and the community? And I think you answered part of that, Tanya, but I just want to throw back in, everyone, talk to your support coordinator, talk to your case manager, talk to agencies. And Tanya, you probably have more to answer on that.
Well, no, I think that's exactly right. And I'm glad that you asked people, providers who might be on the call, if you're providing individualized housing, to put that in the chat, because we get asked that a lot. We at the Ark of Virginia now, we're asked by people, and the alliance that Brittany, Jesse, and Eric have talked about, that they're all liaisons on the board. The alliance members, there are many there who are asking and saying and hearing from their local self-advocates that there aren't enough services to do this. So I really think it's about, if I were now a provider and looking at my business model, I want to know what people are looking for. And we're hearing all the time, well, this isn't available in my part of the state, or no one is doing this, or my support coordinator doesn't know how to connect me with this. So I think when we go back to what Brittany said, it's really about you pushing. Really, everyone said it. Eric said it too, and Jesse, not giving up and asking for what you want. And then that helps us, the other side, the providers, start to make sure that we're meeting that demand and we're looking at the parts of the state where that's missing. So I really will, as a resource, appreciate any provider who can share information in the chat about the individualized housing services that you're providing. I think we know there are a lot of supported employment providers out there, and we're glad. There should be more. We're all about it. But there are a lot. But there are not as many of the individualized housing supporters or providers out there. And so learning about that will be very helpful. I'll ask the panelists, is there anything that you all would like to say about how you convince others to make these changes? If you're talking to a provider, what would you say?
I would say just listen to the PD support and what they want. And I think that, yeah, I think if you do that, it'll be better for everyone.
Very good. Anybody else have anything to say? No? Okay.
I read the same thing what he does saying.
Listening to people, it sounds so simple, but believe me, I recognize as a provider that when you're in the thick of managing a business, it isn't that simple. Brittany?
Mine is having that communication with your individual.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So talking back and forth between folks, because a lot of people have, let me ask you this, Brittany, and anyone on the panel. I've heard a lot from people with disabilities. I think when y'all did the training to people with disabilities, that they didn't know that they could ask for this. So what do you say to them? If they don't know they can ask for this, then they're not asking providers for it.
Go seeking for it. Be the advocate that you're made to be.
That's perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you so much to all of the panelists. We appreciate you sharing your stories. We are very impressed with everything that you've done, and your work as advocates in building up other people is just incredible. So thank you for your work. And thank you to all of our attendees. We are very pleased that you were able to join us, and we'll see you at other sessions during convention. We hope to see you there. Everybody have a great day. Thank you. Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
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 I gotta save the chat and then I can close
Wake
it.
up, now say. Wake up, now say.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.